Hello, good evening. We have our joint Planning Board City Council workshop, and I realize most of us probably know each other, but we're going to run around the room and introduce ourselves first. I guess we'll start with our city administrator.
Hi, Heather Hunter, City Administrator.
Hi, Brian O'Malley, Deputy City Administrator.
She is not currently in front of a mic, but that is our Madam Clerk. Shelley, please continue.
Sure. Shelley Norton, Deputy Planning Director.
David Hediger, Director of Planning and Code Enforcement.
Jim Gallant, Planning Board.
Amy Smith, Associate Member of the Planning Board.
Hi, Lee Albert, Associate Member of the Planning Board.
Shanna Cox, Planning Board Member.
Lucy Bisson, Planning Board.
Michael Marcotte, Planning Board.
Joshua Najin, Planning Board.
Roger Dupre, Planning Board.
Stephanie Gelinas, City Councilor, Ward 7.
Lee Clements, City Council, Ward 6.
Larry Pease, Ward 5.
Rick LaChapelle, Ward 4.
I'm the mayor.
Scott Harriman, Ward 3.
Bob McCarthy, Ward 2.
And Linda Scott, Ward 1.
Director Hediger, Ms. Horton, please, Norton, please take it away.
Are we kicking this off?
Or how, Administrator Hunter.
Notice the look of panic on his face.
I'll do whatever you want.
So really, recognizing there are a lot of amendments that we probably should have been considering for a number of years now. Staff, we put together a list that I think went to before the City Council the last workshop, recognizing both of these groups work hand in hand and changing amendments and looking at codes and various ordinances. We thought we'd kind of kick off this joint meeting. We hope to at least see kind of where people were ranking items by sending out the survey. We had 14 members between the City Council and the Planning Board return the survey, so I appreciate that. It gave us a good temperature on each one of the elements to allow us to say, okay, where are things in the whole scheme of things, where are things being ranked on the order of immediacy? And as I concluded in, I think, the introductory, given the number of 1s, 2s, and 3s, there are a number of things that we need to look at immediately. So I appreciate that feedback. We did receive items number 29 through 43. People were given the opportunity to submit other kind of elements that are ideas that they want to consider. Those, if they were ranked, they were just ranked individually, so those items can be pulled at any point in time. And then the last part kind of resorted what you had. So you'll see the elements that were immediate. We have 5 of them, the short-term items. We have another 15, and then the midterm items, we're looking at 8. So we figured at this point, it allows us, and then you'll see Mr. Hediger's memo from the June 15th workshop on kind of that aligns with what the staff is looking at. So I would suggest at this point, that's the springboard, maybe starting in the amendments in priority order and move from there. So at this point, I would defer to both bodies on how they wanted to kind of vet those items. And then Code and Planning is here as well to offer any advice on that as well. That's the first time I've ever silenced a room.
Linda Scott, go ahead. Or Counselor Scott.
Thank you. So I've got a few things that I'd like to suggest, and I really appreciate that we did it in this format so that we could see where priority was and I thought it was great that we could see that a lot of us were aligning on the same page on a lot of things, and I think that's really important. One of the things that was suggested was something that I suggested, and I brought this up before, and that has to do with our 2017 comp plan and the neighborhood choice plan. I think it's extremely important that as we're moving through and looking at rezoning, any language changes, anything that we're doing, we're ensuring that we're going to be using the comp plan that's already in effect and that neighborhood choice plan, that grant, because that all plays into some of the process here and what we're going to be doing in the future of some of these developments. And I just don't know where we're at specifically on the comp plan. Like 2017 was when this was put out. Do we have any indication as to what we've accomplished in that comp plan? Do we use that comp plan when we're making decisions? I know as being a former planning board member and being on the city council, I have those plans. I've read through them, but it's not necessarily a requirement. And not that I'm asking it to be a requirement, but I think maybe we need to take a look at that and ensure that all of our city councilors, all of our planning board members have these plans, understand them, and we're using them as our guide. And it's not another plan that we have sitting on a shelf like we've done for many years in the past. So that, to me, would be an important starting point, because, in my opinion, they lead into a lot of these changes.
If I may, so with the majority of changes that are being discussed here, well, let me back up. The way the zoning and land use ordinance is written right now, whenever we make an amendment to that, we have to make some type of finding that, or you folks, with a recommendation from the board, has to make a finding that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So we have that. I don't know that I know we haven't done it with this council. I thought we did it with the last council, but we actually have a spreadsheet that shows, if folks that are familiar with the comp plan, towards the back of it, there's an implementation matrix that shows short-term, long-term goals in it. And Doug and I actually worked with Nate Libby when he was actually doing an internship here to get that all into a spreadsheet so we could actually have that as a working document to show what have we done, what should we be doing, short-term, long-term, kind of the same exercise that was done with you folks here tonight. So to your point, Counselor, I mean, there needs to be some synergy there ideally. At the same time, if it's the desire of these two groups to move something else forward that, you know, a short term that was long term in the comp plan, that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's still a finding that was made in the comp plan. It's just a new priority for these groups. That comp plan, I think we talked about it last time, maybe briefly. It's good for 12 years as far as finding a consistency goes with the state, and then we need to do an update at some point. We're doing an update to the Riverfront Master Plan right now, and the Riverfront Master Plan is referenced in the comp plan, so that with a new update to the Riverfront Master Plan, that will be an update to the comp plan at that time too. So we'll be asking both the board and the council when that plan is completed to make that finding. So there's like an update at least to those sections of relevancy.
Councilor LaChapelle.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the planning board. Thank you for the planning staff. I am super excited on getting this moving forward. There's already talk within the community and some excitement on the possibilities that are available here. I would like to see, under the long term, the first one, revise the zoning district boundaries. I'd like to see that moved forward in the 2 to 4 month plan, not the 4 to 12 month plan. I think that's right at the top of the priorities. That would be one of my concerns. I've had the pleasure recently to meet with a couple business people.
Which number are you talking about, Rick?
It's under the points. This is Lewiston Planning Code Enforcement, this page right here, and then just turn it, and it starts showing the short-term 2 to 4 months, and then long-term 4 to 12 months. Yes, from David, yes, page 2, excuse me, Director Hediger's. I have recently had the pleasure of meeting with a couple staff people, with a few business owners, and developers in the city of Lewiston that were seriously considering moving to Brunswick and just moving out of the city and doing other business. And they heard that we're on a very positive track. The planning boards, and speaking with the planning board director and a few of the members, that I think we're all on the same page, and I'm super excited to get some changes done here. So I personally, I know this is a major one. I would, if time is not allotted, I would move some of the things in the 2 to 4 out and put this one in. But I'm yes, ma'am.
So, Counselor, if you look at the amendments in priority order, under immediate, number 3, I believe is the one that you're referring to. So it's already in the,
Boy, you guys are quick. Holy cow. Thank you for taking care of that for me.
If I may, Counselor, Director Hediger, so you have the short-term, long-term, that's not necessarily priority, but just the time required to complete those, that item, or
Yeah.
estimated time?
Yeah, that was kind of the thought when we produced this memo at the last, for the last time we talked about this, as far as, what things might we be able to address more quickly between the capacity that we have upstairs versus some of these items that will take just longer, either because of the public process, the thought involved, getting input from public, the neighbors, things of that nature. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they are any less important. I just think the process is going to take longer in order to get those things forward.
So just to clarify for everyone's benefit, including my own, so if we started, one of the, so we take an item from the short term and then long term, if we started one from each, one might be done in 2 to 4 months, and then the other one might be done in 4 to 12 months, depending on the item, but starting both at the same time, that's the approximate time it would take to complete an item.
I think so. I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. So, for example, the one that Council LaChapelle referenced, the setbacks in the was it the setbacks? No, it was the district boundaries, excuse me. District boundaries, I think that's going to take a little bit of time because that's going to involve notification to many abutters. It's big areas of this community versus if we just made a simple change to maybe the first one, revise lot coverage and impervious ratio. That's a easier ask to get approved. There isn't necessarily notification to dozens or hundreds of property owners. So I think that's the distinction to be made with some of these changes.
Director Hediger, when we spoke last time at the council meeting, this is one of my top priorities, and talking with business people, this is a huge, huge event. You mentioned that we could get this done by the end of the year for the rezoning. So that gives us 5 months so we can get the second. So I guess
I mean, it's possible. I mean,
I have total faith in you, Director. Everything's doable.
I'm sure some of it is out of my hands. I mean, it depends on.
You'll get big hands. Let's get it done.
It depends on the process, right? So at a minimum, it's 1 trip to the planning board. It's 2 trips to you folks. Some of these things might involve more than one public hearing just because of the amount of input that is obtained. We don't really know. I mean, so best case scenario, usually what I tell people when they're going through some type of an amendment process that involves the board and the council is usually a 2 to 3 month process to amend something, where they're coming forward with maybe a contract zoning or something like that. So we let them know it's a 2 to 3 month process. So to say that this could be done by the end of the year, I don't think it's unreasonable, but I don't know what we're going to get for input and support or criticism to any of the things that we're talking about when we have some of these bigger asks. So I don't want to give any false impressions that, oh, geez, it's January and we're still working at the planning board and it hasn't got to you folks. I'd like to think if we're still at the planning board, it's for a good reason. It's not necessarily because of a delay, but because of the process and the way it's working its way through.
Board Member Cox?
Thanks. I guess it would maybe fall into a process point question for this evening. So I'm really excited and significant gratitude for the council for filling this out as well as the planning board, because it is nice to see so much alignment. I think looking at the amendments in priority order is like the most helpful way to review the results. I find, and for what it's worth, Mr. Hediger referred to it as like low-hanging fruit, things that are, you know, text amendments versus like the bigger stuff. And I think that helped me understand what's possible in the short, immediate, and midterm. I guess the question that I would ask is, there's a number of items, as Administrator Hunter pointed out, 29 through 43, that by sheer definition that somebody wrote it differently or that it's a different idea don't appear on the weighted list because there wasn't consensus around that. Because there was such consensus, could we take a couple of moments together to discuss the suggested and new items that we are only able to see tonight? And I mention that because Councilor Chappelle, I very much agree with your priority. I'm super excited to see that tackled. And I would note one of the comments that is an other is revisit all zones to reduce the overall number of zones, enhance clarity and certainty of application of zoning for developers. And if that was something that there was also alignment on being a priority, that might even inform how we would approach that which you've suggested is an important one. So if we're deepening those corridors and we're looking at zoning in some of those areas, we could also be reducing the overall, I think it's 20 plus zones that we carry.
It's not that many, but.
Okay, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
But there might be an opportunity to simplify that also conveys and addresses the concerns that I also hear from developers and business professionals. So I'm just wondering if there is a worth investment of time tonight to discuss some of the ones that we're all seeing for the first time and the way they might inform those of which we already reached agreement and alignment on.
Board Member Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question would be, can we piecemeal it? If we have somebody who needs something done, why can't we amend that area first while we work the rest? Is that possible to do? Like you're talking the big picture, but we don't want to stop people doing work or development in 3 or 4 little places while we wait for the big picture to show up. Is that something, can be moved along together? So if the councilman has someone or someone comes forward and wants a change that we are all going to agree to at some point, can we do a minor amendment or something so they get to do what they want as we work through it, or prioritize, if it's going to be 5 open meetings, can we prioritize that the first one is the one that we know somebody's going to locate a business in, or we might lose a business in if it's not changed?
Do you mind moving the microphone closer to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
To Tim's point, I think we could do something like that. Again, when we're talking about the corridors, that's Main Street, that's Lisbon Street, that's Sabata Street. To do all 3 of those, that's potentially going to be a large undertaking. So I would say like a lot of our emphasis, discussion over the years and as of recently has been Sabata Street. So Sabata Street is probably a first corridor that we'd want to look at. And maybe there's sections on Sabata Street that make more sense than others, given the narrowness of the district. And then we would probably move on to Lisbon Street and then Main Street, because we don't get as many requests for Main Street for whatever reason. But a point well taken is, as both boards know, we get requests all the time from applicants and developers to make changes. So if there's some correlation to a larger project that we're doing or a larger thought, and we can tie it into that, that would be more than appropriate. At the same time, we may be working on something here and there's a different request that's made altogether, and we're going to want to work with those folks too, right? So, I mean, that's whenever somebody's coming forward, they're working, with Lincoln or somebody, and that becomes the next priority. It's just that it becomes the next priority. So, if there is some synergy there to focus on a specific area where we know that it ties in with one of these goals, I think that's smart. We can potentially kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And again, I wouldn't suggest, let's do all 3 corridors at once. I think we should probably focus on one, see how that goes, and we're going to learn as we go along as to what's working and what's not, both from the process and, are we asking for too much? Are we not asking for enough? What are people's reactions going to be?
To that point, Director Hediger, so This is the first time, not the first time you've had this packet, but we all ranked these, and I think that's great. But I guess before we move too much further, I would love to know what the two planning professionals in the room, what you think about the rankings. Like, is this generally agree with? Is there something that should be moved back, or is there something in your estimation that is in the back that should be moved to the front, etc.?
Well, Shelley and I talked, and we both had a lot of threes throughout the document. So, as far as long-term goals, I mean, the way we were looking at it is if there's things that we need to work on immediately, and that's been kind of a sense from both committees here, then we kind of looked at, what did we rank as ones and threes? And we had a fair amount of overlap on that, maybe not as much as the board did, but there was certainly overlap amongst the things that we were looking at as far as...
Excuse me, Director, for clarification, overlap between between all the choices that we made, or overlap between you two?
Between us and what the two groups had.
Gotcha.
So there'll be things like, low-hanging fruit, right? Eliminating yard setbacks. Great, that's something that's easily done. We spend a lot of time speaking to property owners about that. That's something that we could do, and that we would get some, I think, a lot of traction with that. Reducing setbacks in some of the zoning districts. So I'm looking at the list as they're numerically ordered, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So number 1, yeah, we're on board with that. Number 3, we're really on board with that. Number 5, allowing more multifamily development in the highway business. We know that we need more housing. Highway business has a lot of residential development in it already that's non-conforming. To move that forward, the group has the 3s. Shelley and I are in the same area with that. Density requirements in the office, residential, and community business. Again, that would allow more residential development in areas where there's already a lot of non-conforming uses occurring. Parking requirements, we're on board with that as far as either reducing or eliminating those for specific areas of the community, whether it's downtown or other areas. Neighborhood conservation B, that would be number 9. We agree that there's some merit in doing that, as far as being shorter or I guess midterm, what are the terms that we used here, immediate or short term. Commercial uses on the first floor along downtown commercial corridors, so specifically Lisbon Street. That's been a concern of ours, and
Director Hediger, you're reading your numbers off of the ranking one and not the prioritized one, right?
That's right. I'm going through the ones.
Just trying to follow along.
Yep, in numerical order. Yeah. So the ones that are numbered 1 through 28. In an attempt to try to address the mayor's concerns of or question of, where is staff in line with the two groups. So again, commercial corridor, first floor uses. A concern of ours is Lisbon Street. All of a sudden, some of these vacant commercial buildings on Lisbon Street become residential on the first floor. That's a primary commercial district downtown. We have nothing to stop that from occurring. Nathan Zanton's a great example. The Hartley block, he doesn't do commercial development. We convinced him to do commercial development on the first floor because he recognized, what that means for a commercial corridor in a downtown district. Revise the zoning districts along our commercial corridors right up. That's a immediate to short-term goal for staff as well. Accessory dwelling units and in-law apartments, that was something that we had similar rankings on with the groups here. Revise the, sorry, should tell you the numbers, right? Number 27, revise the applicability of development review process. There's a clearer, more streamlined process. As far as we're concerned, if it makes our job easier, it's probably going to be easier for the applicant too. So if we can get that process cleaned up a little bit somehow, that would be a good thing. As well as number 28, potentially coming up with a packaging of fees for developments. I don't know that it's overly complicated, but we could improve the fee structure as to how we get things approved, as far as, we have impact fees, we have traffic impact fees, stormwater, subdivisions. I mean, there's a number of fees, and if you could take that into consideration as well with the building permits, there may be some room for improvement there. So those are the ones that immediately jumped out to Shelley and I as far as like immediate and short term. But again, we had a lot of 3s in there. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done. It's just a matter of prioritizing them and finding the time to make it happen. And that's why we're looking for some guidance from you folks.
Councilor Scott?
Thank you. So I guess I would ask, so when we're looking at taking away what we all answered for our list, and we look at the amendments in priority order, and we have that listed. Now, that was staff that put that together according to our survey versus the other part that what David's saying is a little different in priority, you know what I mean? I want to kind of align that together, because I feel like we have a few things going on here.
Exactly. So if I may, the amendments in priority order are based upon the weighted average of the surveys that were submitted. And at that point, I know staff had reviewed it. It doesn't necessarily reflect the time commitment needed to implement. Okay. So that's just, if capacity was not an issue, this is what you have outlined as your priorities. One of the discussions that we had during the strategic planning session, during, I believe, the workshop and so forth, once we have a game plan that we've identified the priority order, we can go back as staff and say, okay, which ones can we get to do in-house? Which ones, because they've ranked this as immediate, should we put together a priority for consultant and issue an RFP to do that and bring it back before the council and the planning board to see that? But we can't do that until we determine what the priority list is and not look at it from the standpoint of time and low-hanging fruit. That's kind of the second decision tree that needs to happen.
If I may.
Please continue.
So that's sort of what I was looking to get for an answer.
Yes.
So that we can, instead of going through all of these different things and going through all the different pages, let's make a decision as to, because I like the amendments in priority order, because that shows exactly what we all thought on our survey. But using that, along with what Member Cox had said, that we probably should go through some of the suggestions and see what priority would be on those suggestions to also add to this, and then along with what Director Hediger has suggested that they've looked at for themselves, and then we kind of combine that together and then maybe have that discussion, whether it's the planning board has that discussion in city council, but then we start really putting it in priority order. Because I think that if we go through each one here and look at this, there's a lot of different things, and we're probably going to get a little lost, and I don't want to do that, because I think that we all agree that this is something we need to do sooner rather than later, and we all want to work on this as soon as possible without putting too much pressure on Director Hediger. I'm looking at, no, I'm just kidding. You know what I mean? And make sure that we're able to accomplish these things as Ms. Hunter just said, so that we can really get this work done.
No, agreed. I think she nailed it. They're immediate, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're quick.
Right.
Councilor Herman?
Thank you. I wonder if it would be helpful if the planning department went through these and sort of gave an estimate of how long they would take, maybe on a 1 to 5 scale or something. I don't know if it's that simple to do, but then we could sort of look at both the priority and the amount of time it would take to implement, and then make a decision from there.
Member Cox, and then Chair Bizon, and then...
I appreciate that suggestion. The thing that I would add to it, because I think we heard David speak to it a little bit, is if for our own group discussions, we had the ability to know, and I would say please don't rank it, but give us like actual months so that it feels tangible, given the other rankings. But if you were able to say this in the way that you would to somebody who was coming in off the street and saying, I'd like to do this thing with my piece of property, and you'd say, it's going to take this long, to put it into 1 to 2 months, 3 to 6 months, with an internal discussion about the consideration that could be possible if we had contracted support or that. But I think the other thing that would be really helpful to note as we think about, because when I think about the way that I would form my priorities, given all of this input, I begin to think about where there's synergy and sequence of steps. So if you're going to do a public engagement, are there 4 things that we're asking the public to weigh in on so that we're not dragging the public out every month over 6 different things, right? And so it would be helpful if the other thing that you noted is like additional considerations. This would require a robust engagement, or this would be a text review and we could complete items 13, 15, and 18 with a simple text review and edit. If you were able to give that kind of feedback, because I think it's important to be thoughtful about staff time, about resident engagement time, about business owner time, and how they're using it. And it feels like those are the things that would help us start to say, these 3 that are immediate and these 2 that are midterm should get started immediately, because these 2 that are midterm are really engaged and really important. That might be helpful input that could form our thinking.
Chair Bisson, okay. Member Gallant. And then Member Najin, did you have a question? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. My only concern would be with putting months and time on a list. We tend now to look at the short items to get quick gratification for something being done. I think it's more important to understand what the priorities are, what we want to complete, and then they can add the timeline to it. I've never been a fan of having a list and someone says 3 months here, 5 months here, 6 months here. Well, I'm goal-orientated. Let's do 3 and 5. Maybe number 4, which is 7 months, is the most important, but I can't do all 3, but I'll do these 2, and I can come back and say, we accomplished these 2. I think our job should be to figure out what's most important, and then they can tell us how long it's going to take. That's my opinion.
Member Najin?
Just to add on to that, I think that even with the priority list and the way that it's numbered out, many of these overlap in certain ways. And so if we have maybe baskets in which we're keeping these in order to push it through, and that comes back to the point of like, so let's say you have something that is a low-hanging fruit, but it's a low priority, like in those times when we have the time to clean up those low-hanging fruits, we're continuing to work in synergies with the different priorities, So I guess there's a few different ways to tackle it, but I think that many of these things overlap into particular segments or sections, and so we don't want to lose the plot just to focus on a quick fix, so to speak.
Councilor McCarthy.
Yeah, I have to agree with Tim about starting priority and not worry about how long it's going to take, because it's going to take that length of time. So if it's a long job, you want to get in it, but it's a priority, you want to get started on it as soon as you can. I do like the idea that Mr. Najin, I don't know if I got that right or not, but I'm not very good with names, about putting them together, because if we have them before the council or before the board in a group, the people that are most affected by those will just have 1 meeting or 2 meetings to go to rather than 5 or 6 if we break it down, if we don't group them together. So I think that's an excellent idea also, that we should do the grouping along with not worry about the length of time a job is going to take, but just the priority and when we want to get started on it.
Councilor LaChapelle?
Yes, Director Hediger. So if we took, like, my favorite project, the corridors, what would you group in with that corridor? You said Sabata Street would be your ideal to start first. What are the other projects that we would, as was eloquently put into a basket so it's all together to hit in one shot?
So if we're working from the amendments and priority list, I think you could, and number 3 being the one you're referencing.
Correct.
I think you could tie into that number 1 under short term. You might be able to tie in number 4 to that, maybe, under short term again.
Director Hediger, can you?
Sorry. So on the amendments and priority order page, Councilor LaChapelle referenced under immediate number 3, which ones could you put into a basket with immediate number 3? And Shelley, chime in if you see one that I'm missing.
Director Hediger, can you hold up the page you're looking at?
Yes, the amendments in priority order.
Amendments in priority order.
Yep.
I was,
And he's looking at 3 in under immediate. And then short term, 1 and 4.
Yes.
Okay. We're all set here. Please continue, Director Hediger.
I had to number my pages in the bottom too, because I was getting a little confused. So again, immediate, amendments in priority order. Under immediate, number 3, the one Councilor LaChapelle, what else can we put in a basket that might match up with that? I think we could do short-term number 1. I think you could do short-term number 2. I think you could probably maybe do short-term number 4. Short-term number 7, that's going to happen throughout this whole process because there's just going to be tweaks that need to occur to the definition section. So, I mean, that, you know, you can almost... Exactly. You could almost eliminate 7 from this whole discussion. Maybe under midterm, number 1.
Midterm?
Yes, midterm
It
number
would
1.
almost have to be, wouldn't it, to be thinking about deepening the zones?
Yep. Again, maybe midterm number 4 as well. I think those you could put into a basket. Keep in mind, I mean, we'll give this more thought, but I think we approach each corridor as a separate process, and I think each corridor may be broken into segments as well, because, you know, Lisbon Street by East Avenue is different than Lisbon Street by the Lisbon boundary or something like that, you know? So, yeah, I think we could potentially group them together to the points made where, you know, we have only a couple meetings versus a dozen meetings potentially. And we can see how that works too, because we may find out either through the planning board process or the council process that everybody's good. If that basket has 4 things in it, maybe everybody's good with 3 of them, but 2 of them, you know, need more discussion. Well, at that point, we can decide whether or not we wait for those 2 to catch up or we keep on going with the 3 at that time. So absolutely, we can work to make something like that happen.
Councilor Pease.
So in that case, should we number these accordingly, or like alphabetically, or like start with A's and put all A's into the one section and then B combined?
Counselor, I think that was the intention after we confirmed the priority order.
I
It's
thought that's
allowed us to then kind of go back and lump the like items together.
Okay, well,
The analogy that people have used tonight is perfect, the baskets, and then lump those together, bring them back, maybe at the same time, we could assign some durations to them, and then make sure those baskets are now in the order that everybody wants them in.
Okay, I thought we were doing that tonight, putting them in baskets.
We can if you want to.
Well, no, I didn't know if it was their choice, put them in baskets, because they're more aware of what's going on with them than us.
Dave, do you feel comfortable doing that on the fly tonight, or do you want to? We could do it, and then I guess you can review it one more time before we finalize it, if that makes you feel more comfortable.
Well, I mean, we just did one basket, I think.
Yeah.
That'll keep us busy.
meeting adjourned.
So, I mean, if the thought is to look at these 5 immediate goals and see what other baskets we can create, we might be able to give you a rough idea this evening, I think, looking at it. I mean, you know, understanding that it's subject to change because we go back upstairs and say, what were we thinking? But
So
I think
that
we
same
can-
basket could be used on the 3 corridors.
Exactly.
So we're making a generic basket that would take care of all 3 major corridors.
Exactly, except that first basket might take care of 5 of those items that are going to apply to another basket later on, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay, we're going to recognize a few people here. Councilor McCarthy, and then I think Member Cox, and then Member Najin. Did you have your hand up again? Or Member Marcotte. Okay, there we go. Councilor McCarthy.
I'm wondering if we talked about condensing the number of zones. Is that something we should tackle first before we get into all of this other stuff? Is to see what is actually needed, clean up the different districts or whatever into a condensed number, apply them to where it is now, what would fit into that, and then adjust from there as we adjust the corridors or whatever. I just think that would make sense to clean up that first and then move to the other changes that we're going to make on especially corridors and stuff like that.
We do want to, I think it would be a good idea, if we had fewer zoning districts, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think there's some zoning districts that we might be able to do that relatively easy. You know, there's a lot of similarities when you start looking at like the highway business and the community business district. There's a lot of duplication amongst those. We might be able to do that, Counselor. I'm hesitating because I would want to look more closely at all the use categories and see. I don't want to just come out and say, yeah, let's do that, because there's probably some consequence that I'm not considering when doing that. But I can understand why you would ask that, because yeah, if we do that, then that takes care of one of the issues as far as reducing setbacks. Instead of having to do it in 2 districts, now we only have to do it in 1 district. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is only a couple of months' observation, but there's already been a little bit of combination that happened this spring. I think there was the office
service district.
Office service district was eliminated. So I think there is probably a bit more that can happen, but I don't get the sense that there's a plethora of combination that needs to happen. There may be a few districts, but I don't think we're talking about going from 20 to 10. We may be talking about going, and I don't know if 20 is the number, but from 20 to 18 or 16. It depends. Like, I don't know where we're starting, if we're starting with 15, but I don't know as there's a lot of combining that's going to make sense when we look at the nitty-gritty of the nuances of how our community neighborhoods are different.
I think it's a fair point. If there are board members or counselors who think, there's 20 districts and we're going to go down to 10, I don't think that's going to happen. Can we eliminate it? 2 or 3, that might be something we can do. But I don't think you're going to go down to 10 districts necessarily. My reaction is that's just not going to go over well necessarily, because you do have a lot of different type of development patterns in the community, and if you start blending those all together, I'm not sure that's in the best interest from a zoning and land use perspective. There's certain areas that it'll work, but to get it down that few districts, whatever that number is, if people were thinking a big number, a big small number, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Member Cox, did you?
Thanks, I appreciate it. I don't hold the assumption that it's big to small or that the drop, regardless of the starting point, is significant. I do think that there is wisdom in saying and we did do this, and we saw the wisdom in it once already, to Shelley's point, but if the ability to say, particularly in the corridors where you start to see not just them bump up left to right along the corridor, but the way we're looking at the way it falls into the zone behind the corridor, right? What level of consistency makes sense? If you've got a corridor business zone here and then a 3 different types of neighborhood residential. What are the patterns that we can see about the opportunity to be consistent about the residential zoning that always is behind the commercial business corridor, for example? And then how might you apply that throughout your basket of business corridors, for example? And so I just think that, and this is part of why I was hoping we could spend some time talking about the other new surface ones. There's a number of opportunities for those suggestions to inform the way you approach the other priorities, and not to bump one of those priorities, but to just be completing those priorities with the lens. The other that I would name, and it might be unpopular, is if you look at the other suggestions that were made, there is, when you talk about baskets, there is a significant basket that most of these fall into that is less about the specifics. You're not seeing language about impervious or setbacks, or you're seeing language about process. You're seeing language about customer service. You're seeing language that talks about building confidence for developers and investors. And I would just say that if the takeaway from that is there is a joint concern and priority named from both of these bodies, that we would like to see any of the changes approached in a way that is customer friendly, eases the administrative burden on staff, embraces technology while exploring and executing these priorities, that's a whole different message than go fix this zone. And I guess that's the kind of underpinning piece, that if there's concerns heard by this council, as there have been concerns heard by this board from people who are looking to develop, invest, or spend time in the city, and our goal that we can say in unison is, as you go through this process, think about the opportunities to use online applications, to, when you're doing the bucketing of the fees, make the use process simpler, not just for your administrative burden and the way that we have to review amendments and that you have to review amendments, but the way the person who walks into the 3rd floor is able to see the experience, predict the experience, and navigate the experience in a way that hopefully benefits you and staff as well. But there is a whole bunch of comments in the other bucket that are related to that, and not square footage, setbacks, zone size. And I just want to name that.
Thank you. Member Markov.
Probably about 10 minutes ago, but when we were talking about baskets, and in reference to the immediate item number 3, there were several baskets. Question for Dave Hediger. That doesn't mean that that basket goes away. That basket could reappear in another discussion, correct?
Correct.
And similarly, if we were addressing immediate item number 3 and looking at one of the corridors, that could assist in reducing zones, maybe not an immediate zone going away, but making progress towards consolidating zones in a way where something withers away until it's gone on future discussions.
It very well may, you're right. I mean, once you get into that process, that could be an outcome.
What I'd like to come away with tonight is to have a charge to immediately jump into something. This item number 3 sounds like a great item. And if there's a few of the 28 items, or even the additional 15 items that could immediately be put on an agenda and dealt with because it won't have an impact somewhere else, it's something that can be taken care of in the immediacy, what should have been done yesterday, so to speak. Maybe that's how we do it. And while we're doing that, someone is reformulating this survey and creating new priorities as we move along.
Councilor Jelinas, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, now it's different because it was like a while ago, but I would agree with Board Member Marcotte. I mean, I think identifying that first basket's really important and getting some work started there. I also like the idea, Councilor McCarthy, about doing it almost by districts. Because if I think about the short term, let's pull one. Number 1, eliminating yard requirements and regulating development of buildings and impervious, that whole thing. For me, it would be like dependent on what are we talking about, what district are we talking about, like what area are we talking about. Like I wouldn't know where to put that basket because it's going to be dependent on that, right? So I I like the idea of just moving forward with at least a basket and then regrouping from there.
Councillor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the immediate amendments in their priority order here, we've compiled a basket for number 3. Why not go with 1 through 5, compile a basket, and then look at them, and then perhaps prioritize the baskets? I think number 3, with all of the appendages to it, makes absolute sense, but maybe we'll come up with something that might be a little more important in priority. But looking at those 5, those are the 5 that everyone seems to think are on their priority list. Let's basketize, make a basket case out of everything, I guess. We seem to be good at making baskets, but I would say take the 5, group them. If Director Hedica could do that for us.
Yeah, we can, absolutely.
And then
I
we
think
can
you'll see
take a
some.
look. I agree that we've got to pick a point to start.
Yes.
We've been on the cusp of things for years, and we just don't seem to get over the top of the hill.
And I think when we do that basket, I think you'll see overlap, number 1 under short term is going to apply to a number of these,
Just keep us away from that basket of deplorables, that's all, okay?
Anything further to add, Director Hediger?
Not this time.
Okay. Councillor Clement, you're...
Well, I was hoping that at some point that Director Hediger would take item 1 and see if we can combine.
Do that tonight, if you'd like. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we're all here, so.
Let's go for it.
Okay.
So, if we are looking at number 1, revisit impervious lot coverage ratio, determine appropriate ratios to support development. Do folks need any context with this, like what this is all about, or am I just impervious ratio? How much a lot is covered by pavement, buildings? Lot coverage is how much of a building, how much of a property is covered by buildings, and that can limit the amount of development activity that occurs on a lot. So great, we revisit those numbers. Again, I think if we're making a basket, with number 1 going under short term, number 1 under short term is going to apply. I think number 3 under short term could apply. Same with number 4 under short term. Number 4 under short term is a great example of tying the 2 together, because if the board and council are going to reduce or eliminate parking requirements, then that would allow you to have greater lot coverage on your property. Lot coverage is how much of your lot can be covered by buildings. So there's definitely a relationship there.
Would 8 be applicable in the same way that, to some extent, descriptions are going to be throughout? Short-term 8?
Possibly. I mean, we could say that. We could say number 8 under short term. I mean, again, as long as we're not casting this basket in stone this evening, I think it's just to give people a sense as to how we can group some of these.
And to your point earlier, Administrator Hunter, we're kind of going through this exercise now, but then we'll give planning and code and our city planner a chance to kind of go over the baskets and make sure there was something that we didn't think of right here, right now.
Right.
Okay.
We can even hit some midterm things with some of this.
Well, yeah, Chair Pisa.
Would, since we're revisiting the impervious lot, would number 2 under intermediate fit in there too? Because if you're, combine those 2, because if you're increasing impervious and lot coverage, then you might want to look at the setbacks.
Absolutely.
At the same time.
Nope, yeah, that's a great point, Lucy.
Okay.
Yep, so you're right. I mean, number 1 and 2 under immediate are going to,
kind of fit together.
1, 2, and 3, there's gonna be overlap there, depending on the discussion there. I mean, that, under immediate goals, 1, 2, and 3 are gonna relate, and then there's things that we can pick out of these short terms and midterms that may apply to that. Like,
Well, if you're up under short term, if you're doubling the number of structures on a property, you're definitely messing with your impervious.
yeah, but like I would say number 12 under short term, if that's what you're referencing. I think that's a different discussion, as far as, it's not so much that's a use discussion versus, how much of the lot is actually gonna be developed by something. So I'm not sure I would include 12 with that, but I might go to midterm, and again, with tying it under immediate goals 1, 2, and 3, going over to midterm, number 1, clarifying buffer requirements. Yeah, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Maybe number 4, the landscaping might tie into that. Maximum setbacks under number 5. So I think those right there, those short-term goals, we could probably apply to the immediate 1, 2, and 3. I mean, and I think what'll be easier is, I can do the same for number 4 and 5, and I think what I'd like to do is I'd share that with the council and the planning board, just to say, hey, great, this is what we've come up with here. If there's any heartburn, let me know, and if we need to, we can work with administration to regroup and revise those buckets, but if the buckets are substantially in line with what everybody's thinking. Baskets, buckets.
We're weaving baskets here, Director
I
Heddick.
feel like this is gonna be some type of game where we say the word a lot. As far as immediate goal, to build upon Council Clement's thoughts about starting with those immediates, number 4, evaluate the OR district and provide more opportunities. Just to give people an idea, again, I think you're gonna be tying in number 1 of the immediate, because there might be lot coverage issues there. Short term, the yard discussion again, number 1 there. Number 3 is gonna tie into that, because we're talking directly about the OR district. Parking, number 4 is gonna be tied into that. Possibly number 5 ties into that as well. So, I think a different basket altogether probably is immediate number 5, and this goes to Shanna's point about the process, and what people's experience is. And so I think number 5 is gonna tie into whatever's under short term and midterm. Yes, there's gonna be changes that simplify the process, but there's things in here that talk about changing the threshold for development review, where staff can potentially review larger projects, or, changing the home occupation criteria, coming up with, I thought we had in here, the packaging of fees. So I think that's a totally different basket for number 5, when you start looking at how you can improve the experiences as far as permitting and getting approvals.
Okay, Mr. Hediger, for us linear people, on number 4, the basket, that was the immediate, you stopped at short-term number 5. Was there any others that were going in that basket?
Tying to number 4 under immediate?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, keep up. Okay, so we're talking about evaluating the office residential district. Number 9 under short term would apply to that. Number 10 will likely apply to that. Again, under midterm, number 1, number 2, potentially number 5. I think that's probably a good spot to stop there. And I can do number 5 immediate. Number 5 being revise the applicability of development review process. again, I think there'll be some overlap there, because if the process is clear, then part of that clarification would be like, hey, what's the difference between a yard and an impervious area and setback? If we address that all as part of something else, then number 2 is getting addressed in some part. But again, with 5 being the immediate one, again, I think number 4 under short term could apply to that.
Potentially neighborhood use, requiring less contract rezones if you address that.
Which number's that?
5 under short term.
5, look at
That was wrapped into, if the update there allowed for staff decision-making for specific corner store type cafe neighborhood businesses.
Maybe. I guess we could tie in number 5 with the short term. I think number 10, that question gets asked all the time about accessory units and in-law apartments. I think that's gonna tie in, again, making the process clearer and more streamlined. Certainly staff's life will be easier in explaining that to property owners, and if it's easier for us, then it's probably gonna be easier for anybody that we're explaining it to.
Similar stuff like that. For discussion.
Yeah, and Shelley's pointing out number 12 under short term. We spend a lot of time talking about how lots can be developed with residential uses. The question is, you folks have seen from Shelley, she gave you a summary of LD 2003. That's what number 12 under short term is all about. That's going to be kind of a big nut to crack as far as, you know, the community discussion goes, and we're still looking for a little bit of guidance from MMA on how that's all going to pan out. Some people have said it might even get challenged. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I mean, it's early. It's July. It's, you know, but there are certain things, if that stands the way it's written, it's July of next year that we have to incorporate a number of those changes there. So we're going to be talking about number 12 regardless if it's on anybody's list, because we may have to per state statute. Again, trying to tie things to the immediate number 5. It's, no, I'm not going to go there. Number 15, under midterm, number 1. Maybe number 4. Again, number 5. There's going to be a lot of duplication here. You know, the basket's going to have multiple to Mike Marcotte's point, you know, multiple items. You're going to get more than one item in your basket. And number 7 under midterm. So ones that I've kind of avoided, that maybe goes to Heather's point about, do we need more help, or where do those go? The short term, number 12, the whole LD 2003, we're going to need to do that. We may be better equipped to do that in-house. We may not. Time will tell, and we'll be communicating that. Number 13 under short term, plan unit development. That's a great tool that we actually don't have in Lewiston, that provides more flexibility for development to occur where you might not need to have frontage. Right now in Lewiston, you have to have frontage on a city street or a private road in order to have a developable lot. Plan unit development is just that, a planned development where there can be lots and areas set aside for development in some type of pattern or rhyme or reason that works, where you might not need to have frontage. That takes some time to draft that. That's not necessarily something that we just take off a shelf. Same with number 14, our cluster subdivision standards. We have cluster subdivision standards. We thought about when housing was booming in the early 2000s there, we had a number of cluster subdivisions occurring, and it really came to our attention that our cluster subdivision provisions are in need of improvement. We haven't done anything with them. That's something that we should be revisiting there as well. So some of those you would tie together they're not necessarily limited to residential development, but they're all kind of like a development type amendment that it applies to. And then there's also some in here that you've seen about, almost tied to like food sovereignty, right? Like what can we do to clarify, well, I should reference the numbers, right? Like under short-term, number 11, Right to Food Act. How's that gonna change things? I know we have another one in here as well about.
Midterm 6.
Wait, what number is it, Shannon?
Midterm 6.
Yep.
Yeah, midterm 6, provide clarification in urban agriculture. I mean, that is a question, I mean, that would, some of that could be easy. I mean, we have discussions with people like, if I think I mentioned that, if the mayor wants to grow garlic on his roof and sell it at the farmer's market, I don't know that that's a problem. But it is a problem right now. So things like that, as people do look to do more agricultural use. We're gonna be talking about bees and chickens, right? That's all part of that.
You had to bring it up.
I know, exactly. I might add some more foul to that discussion when we move on.
Careful, we absolved you from quite a bit of responsibility there.
Yeah, that's right.
Member Glant, did you have something to add?
First, I want to thank the director, and I want to thank the city administrator who's over there trying to write these basket numbers down one by one. And I hope you all wrote down the numbers so you know what basket's what and how many items are in each basket. In reality, the idea is terrific. The process should be allow them to go back and come up with a list and a matrix that says that this is basket 1 and number 3 is the priority. We're going to complete everything on you guys' wish and consider the items on the wish list. And come back to us and say, based on what we're looking at, we can actually take care of 17 items with this one, 16 with this one, 5 with this one, and then we say, do it. Because unless you're going to try to do them all at one time, and in fairness, been with him for quite a while now, he's sharp, he's quick, but I know when he gets back upstairs, he's going to go, oh, I can't believe we said that. Or look at something else. So I think in fairness to him, to put him on a spot like that tonight, he did a terrific job, but I would like to see him have the opportunity to maybe go, well, maybe that really doesn't tie into there. Yeah. I told him it would, but it doesn't really work. So that's my input.
Councilor LaChapelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. Tim, my concern is we talk a lot and we get little done. I want to move forward. Time is of the essence. I agree with looking at, put a couple notes, looking at the process, looking at the other suggestions, totally in favor of it. But I don't want it to be at the expense of us not doing anything. So I'm a huge proponent of number 3. I say run with number 3. If you want to use Sabata Street as the guinea pig, let's start working on Sabata Street, and you make the decision how many things we can lump in with that. But let's get it going. I don't think we need to come back 3 or 4 times to the planning board, zoning, the city council, say, well, what do you think? No, start it. Get the ball rolling now, and let's start moving forward. You've made a basket. You might, as Tim says, when you get upstairs, you go, oh, this piece doesn't really fit in that basket, get rid of it. Or if you think there's something else that would affect it because you're dealing with a broad base, if we're looking at where the Dairy Joy is on Sabata Street, that's going to be far different than where LaPointe's Lawn and Garden is on Sabata Street. There is a huge difference. Or where Mr. C's is outer Sabata Street, or where the storage units are almost at the end into Sabatas. There will be some variance. So I have faith in that department. I just want to see some action and something moving forward. And I'd like to see it before the end of the year on Sabata Street. And I guess those are my marching orders. You tell me what you need to get it done before the end of the year, and let's go for it. If we need to hire it out, hire it out. The time is of the essence. We cannot wait any longer. This has gone on too long. So move.
Member Najin.
There's just one thing kind of wanted to bring up, and that's, we've talked about the 3 corridors, right? Lisbon Street, Sabata Street, and Main Street. But there are also residential corridors that exist that are high-traffic corridors. So you have East Ave, Russell Street as well. And in that as well, the downtown business district, which is usually, I guess, defined as like just Saunterville, but there is really no like parameter to the downtown business district, right? Could we maybe just pound out some of the definitions of these spaces so that we can work on all of them, like as you know what I'm saying? Like, so if we have a standard for Sabata Street, we could probably apply that to Lisbon Street as well, because it's similar, And the same thing with, I look at Russell Street Extension, and there's not a lot of business on Russell Street, right? But there's a high traffic count there. Same thing with East Ave, which just kind of connects Lisbon Street to Sabata Street. And so, are there development opportunities there? Are there not? Are we putting too much money in infrastructure in places where there aren't people? I think about that a lot when I look at Webster Street, right? There's sidewalks on both sides, beautiful giant sidewalks that nobody's ever on, And so, like, it's just the thoughts about like how we kind of make all of those corridors snap together, and again, defining like what the actual downtown business district like really is. I know that we were looking at it from a TIF perspective when we were talking about the TIF, and then I see Link in the back too, and I'm sure economic and community development would have some opinions to share in there too. So just to make it kind of move together as one piece.
Councilor Clement, did you have something to add?
Yes, if I might, Mr. Mayor. I totally concur with Councilor LaChapelle. Let's get something going. I like the idea of number 3. We'll ask the director to go back up to the 3rd floor, hang that sign that we talked about. What can we do to help you? And then come back to us with a plan for implementing 3. Let's get it done before the end of the year.
I think some of them would say just eliminate the 3rd floor, and that would help them out.
Careful, you'll have chickens and bees again.
Anything further, Councilor Clement?
Nope.
No.
All set, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you. And if I can just make a suggestion on the items that were submitted by individuals, if we're not going to go through those, there are some really good suggestions in there. Maybe could we possibly have that sent back and we all put a number to it so that we can include that later on as part of the conversation? Because there's some good pieces in there that I think should be brought up as well, and I just want to ensure that we're not eliminating those in all of this conversation, because there was a lot of thought put into some of this, so.
Yes, we can
And
most definitely. Again, some of them are more process-oriented, some are more license-oriented. So if we're kind of sticking straight with the amendments, I'm looking at potentially 29 to be looped in.
Yep.
32, 33, and again, I'm working off that other list. And then 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42. Other items I fully agree with, but they probably are not part of this, so we just need to find where their home belongs. I know the economic development team is looking at putting some matrix together from the strategic planning session that they had. There are quite a few of these that might be able to be looped into there. So we can discuss that as a staff level and then bring that back.
Thank you.
Member Cox.
Sorry. I just wonder, and I want to lift this up because I've heard Councilor Scott requested at previous council meetings, and then Member DeJean as well as in our own planning board. In the perfect world next steps, which we don't live in a perfect world, but let's just paint that picture for a second, where David has all of the time he needs, which is also quick, to be able to do some of the deeper thinking that you weren't afforded tonight and to do the baskets, and then the next steps both account for some action relative to number 3 and whatever basket that falls into, and then us in our various formations hearing more both about that recommendation, but also us doing work that supports you executing these things. We're gonna have to do that. I'm wondering if one of the interim steps that gives you some of the time you need to do the text amendments, pull the maps, do the research and all of those things at our next meetings might allow us the opportunity to have a refresh on the comp plan and choice plan, which would better support both of our bodies in all of the discussions we're going to have in the coming months to do that which we've asked you to do. I'm just wondering if kind of the parallel process of you doing your research and work is us getting informed on the very fundamental pieces that will enable us to be supportive of making decisions and good discussion in the coming months so that you can execute this. And so I know that's in the other bucket.
I think my hope would be, if it's okay with the two groups, is send, for those of you who may not have the two studies, our documents, send those out, and as staff mentioned, they already have a file, kind of what's been completed, what's not. Send that out, and then if there is concern, then just email us back, and then we can start slotting it, whether it needs to be on a planning board agenda or a council agenda workshop, or next time we reconvene together, we should talk about this. That way, we're not using meeting time to do that. It'll allow us to move forward on the basket items. And it's kind of like a homework assignment for,
Yeah. I think,
two
teacher, you
boards.
should send out the assignment then. I think that's
if
that's
that
part
works
of-
for everybody. Okay, great.
So I guess to recap, so you'll be sending us some homework, and Director Hediger and Planner Norton, you'll be arranging some baskets.
We will be basket makers.
Yes.
Yep, we'll do exactly that. We'll email you, everybody, those documents. If people want hard copies, let me know, and I can get you hard copies as well. And yeah, we'll what we verbalize tonight, we'll put in writing so everybody has a better understanding of where we're going to go from that. It sounds like probably focusing on number 3 first, and all the goodies that go in that basket along with this. Yes. Yes. Number 3 being Sabata Street, please. Thank you. Yes.
I guess we're looking pretty good.
I think we are. Again, I want to thank both groups for taking the time to do the surveys, to include the other items, because even though they may not necessarily fit in ordinance or planning, piece, it's still a very important feedback to hear, and it allows us to best determine where it will be looped into. And I think we've got a game plan.
I would like to thank, you first, Chair Bisson.
I was just going to say the same thing. I would like to thank the city council and the planning board members and planning staff and other staff to be, to have us here tonight so that we can go over some of this stuff and do the real planning and have the planning board feel that we are included in planning. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Chair Bisson. Thank you for the rest of the planning board, and thank you, Director Hediger and Planner Norton.
Thank you.
Do we need a vote to, or a motion to head into executive session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would be starting our business meeting, and we'd need that motion.
May I have a motion? Councilor Peace, followed by Councilor McCarthy.
And the deputy city administrator will read the,
To enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056C, to discuss real estate negotiations of which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
Madam, yeah, all in favor? Are we calling a roll, or is this working?
All in favor, it's fine.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll